the service on education and really looking at education as a protective factor. We are also really promoting working with families, with parents and carers as protective partners, and really harnessing their ability to prevent their own children from offending, but also linking in with communities and the community aspect to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Are there any more comments on this paper, please? I don't see anybody, so I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 193, and I take it from discussion everybody's happy with those recommendations, so we'll agree those and move on to item 11, please, Councillor Hayden.
Thank you. This is the outcome of the consultation on proposals to expand Broomfield South Special Inclusion Learning Centre by 100 places as part of a school rebuild and the establishment of a permanent satellite site for post-16 provision as well. So the report outlines our proposal to rebuild and expand Broomfield Silk, as we call it, by 100 places. This will address the poor conditions that we see at the moment and meet the growing need for specialist education. The rebuild is aimed for completion by September 2027. So as a council, we have created more than 450 specialist learning places across the city since 2020. But the number of children and young people living in Leeds with an educational, health and care plan continues to increase each year. So this plan also includes establishing a permanent satellite site for post-16 provision at Arlington Business Centre, and this will be from September 2025. The proposal, supported by the school's leadership, underwent public consultation in July 2024, and this report details the responses, 85% of which were supportive, and it seeks approval to proceed to publication of the statutory notices on the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Are there any comments on this paper? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you. I support this proposal. I understand it was first mooted about 5 years ago in 2019, and the reason it didn't go ahead then was because the local ward members were strongly opposed to it. So my question is, are the current ward members supportive and happy for this to go ahead? And I'd also be grateful for some comment on what the impact of the proposed changes to post-16 transport will be to the young people who would be potentially attending this site.
Thank you. Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you. It went out for consultation on in July of this year, and the local ward members are supportive. There will be further consultation in terms of the planning, in terms of the detail of the building, and local residents, etc., will be able to, make comments around that. And in terms of the post-16 provision and the consultation that's been happening around what's happening post-16 transport, it should be said that nobody who currently is in receipt of post-16 transport, nothing will change for them as well in terms of their transport package. It is for new applications. Any potential change will be for new applications from September 2025. So the current post-16 who will move to Arlington Business Centre, their transport arrangements will not be affected. I'll let Dan come in on the question as well.
Dan, please.
Apologies, thank you. Just in terms of the post-16 transport piece, there will always be into the future some changes depending on where children and young people and future children and young people who end up using the provision live, and so there will be a net gain or a net loss depending on where those children live from year to year. So we feel that the benefits of the provision significantly outweigh any potential risks caused by additional transport costs in the future, which might be probably cost neutral. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Are there any more comments on this item, please? I don't see anyone wanting to come in, so I'm going to turn to the recommendations, and I'll take it from the comments that everybody is supportive of these recommendations. That's great. Thanks, everybody. We'll move on to item 12, please, Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Leader. This is the Child Poverty Strategy for Leeds, and it's an update report on the important cross-council and cross-city work to tackle child poverty in Leeds. Poverty has a profound impact on children, young people and families. We know there are strong links between experiencing poverty in a child and having worse mental health and physical health and a shorter life, lower grades in education, poor financial health and lower paid insecure work. The refreshed strategy for 2024 to 2027 is included in Appendix 2 and sets out how we set to mitigate these impacts of poverty on children's lives, partnering with the third sector, public and private sectors, partners in education and families and communities. I'd like to highlight the consultation work which has involved children and young people in the refresh and has seen their priorities given greater prominence, including the need to address the stigma associated with poverty. I would also like to welcome the new government task force on child poverty and their plans for a national child poverty strategy to be published in the spring, and I look forward to working with the new government on tackling this a very, very difficult issue for our children and young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Are there any comments, please? Councillor Lamb, please.
Just very briefly, Chair, I think we all want to achieve the same outcome on this. I don't think there's any doubt on it, so absolutely welcome the support and proposals. I suspect we might have some disagreement on some of the causes and the ways to deal with it, but I think the focus needs to be on trying as best as we can to work together to achieve the outcomes of reducing and eradicating child poverty in our city. So happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. I take it from that, I'm going to turn to the recommendations now, and I take it from that everybody on the board is supportive. That's great. So we've concluded Councillor Hayden's papers, thank you, and we're on to my paper on the agenda, which is the Joint Strategic Assessment 2024, which is a piece of work we've done jointly between ourselves at Leeds City Council and the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board. And I'll bring Councillor Venerin in a few moments to jointly introduce this paper alongside myself. It is I found it a really interesting report because it sets out in a very structured way a lot of information about our city and about the changes in our city since we last did a similar piece of work in 2021. I think the information is not intended just to sit in this report once we've considered it today, but to use the information in it to inform our decision making over the years ahead about how we can impact and bring around some of the improvements, for example some of the things we're just talking about on the last report as well. So whereas I think it is a really important piece of work and a really comprehensive piece of work, it is about recognising some of the challenges in the city, and I think it's really important that contained within the report are some of the challenges residents have given us as well, and also to look about how we take it forward. So I'm going to ask Councillor Venner to come in, please.
Thank you, Leader. It is a really interesting report. If you like kind of data and epidemiology, it's fascinating. It's a really good picture of our city. I'm glad the Leader asked me to speak on this because it's a report that we've always used a lot on the Health and Wellbeing Board. So it's a report that I refer to a lot in my work because it really does enable us to identify the needs of the city and plan accordingly. So it is a document that it feels very dynamic because it's used throughout its lifespan, and it gives us a really clear picture of where the focus of our work needs to be, particularly in looking at the wider determinants of health. And it gives us the data which underpins what we consider to be the most important principles of our work. So the data in this report really clearly identifies why we've got a priority around reducing health inequalities, and that's our central, most important priority in the Health and Wellbeing Board. The report outlines some of the achievements since the last Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, which we referred to last week in Council. So becoming a fast-track city, which I'm bringing a report on next time. Forward Leeds, which is just rated outstanding for drug and alcohol provision. The house building that Councillor Lennox referred to last week as well. And of course, becoming a marmot city, which brings a framework that delivers focus around the need to tackle health inequalities and take into account the wider determinants of health. It also really clearly outlines the challenges we've got. So child poverty is obviously a massive one, which Councillor Hayden's just referred to. We've also got an increasing older population. There's the inequity, which underpins everything that we're trying to address. And the data, as I said, it directs us in terms of where we need to put energy. So when we discussed this at Health and Wellbeing Board a couple of weeks ago, areas that we discussed included, we were talking about transport as one of the determinants of health, and Councillor Arif talked about the low uptake of bus passes in her area, which is an area of high deprivation. So we know that's an area we've got to do work. We also talked about cancer screening because there's lower prevalence of cancer in deprived areas, but higher rates of mortality, which is really clear. It's not actually lower levels of prevalence, it's lower levels of diagnosis. So we know we've got work to do around cancer screening and using the same approaches that we used around things like vaccinations in communities during the pandemic. So it's a really, really important document because it genuinely does inform our work. It gives us the knowledge base that we need to identify what the priorities are for the city, particularly in relation to health, in terms of the work that we're doing on the Health and Wellbeing Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Venner. Are there any comments, please? Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly and broadly, it is a huge and important piece of work. The right place to get into the detail is across all scrutiny boards, I would suggest, which is where it's being done, and quite rightly so. I will spare detailed questions just for the sake of it. I think the broad point is just having that reassurance, and I think you've kind of given it already, that this needs to underpin everything across the council, and it's not just something that is a really good piece of work but then sits on a shelf until we dust it down next year again. It's actually making sure it really is underpinning, and I think the recommendation B, how it's integrated into all of our work, is the key thing. So that's my main comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We did discuss it at Resources and Strategy Scrutiny on Monday, and to be fair, myself and members felt we could have had the whole meeting just on not just what's in this report, because it is some really interesting information, but the point we've all made is what do we do with it. Mariana, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, I was just going to mention about scrutiny. We did have other chairs there as well, which was really helpful. The only thing I wanted to add was just to thank you for everybody who's been involved, because like a lot of the reports we've had on today, whilst the council plays a key role in producing the JSA, it's absolutely not the only partner. We, really value the contribution from health colleagues and partners, and particularly the third sector, etc., who, give us really good and valuable insight into it. So yeah, just a thank you, because it is a, genuinely a co-produced piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no more comments from the board, I'll move to the recommendations on page 333, and I think we can take it from discussion. Everybody is happy with those. That's great. And we'll move now on to Councillor Cooper, please, and item 14.
Thank you, Leader. And first of all, for my reports today, I have two financial papers. The first one being the medium-term financial strategy. So this is the 5-year fiscal plan for the council, and it's reporting today at Executive Board that over that 5-year period in time, that that we have a £206 million gap that we need to bridge, and £106 million of that relates to next financial year, which is 25-26. The paper goes into detail about how those figures are brought about in terms of pressures, either inflationary or other costs, or you know, other ways as well. One of the key pressures that the council faces over that period of time is the increase in terms of adults and children's social care support needs, the increase in the commissioning services for both of those, and the increase in demand and demography that we're looking at in terms of both adults and children as well. The number of other factors that the paper goes into, but the key to the biggest part of it is to do with the increase in that demand. The paper also goes into detail around the capital programme and sets out the next 10 years in terms of our ambition around the capital programme. It details the housing revenue account in there, and also the dedicated schools grants. I'll leave it there for now, Chair, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this paper? Any comments? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot you can say, to be honest, but I would give the impression that I've got no interest in it, because clearly we have. The gap for next year is eye-watering, and I mean, I don't know if you've got any indications yet about what may or may not be coming in the budget that you're in a position to share. You know, a year ago I was asked to write to the government to lobby for a variety of things, which I'm happy to do. I'm not sure I'm not sure how much attention was paid to the letters then from me, but I certainly don't think they'll get much attention now. But there was some limited impact. But I don't see anything you can share, because that is a staggering amount of money to find in 1 year. It's going to require all of us to pull together and look at the things we most value, and the things that, I mean, it's the definition of difficult decisions, isn't it? And I'm straying on to, we kind of often do these both together, don't we? And I won't ask again on the next paper, but I'm straying into the territory of financial health monitoring, but it's the usual, I suppose, can anyone give a reassurance? And I fully understand all the demand pressures and things, but we really have to get a grip of the budgets that we have and stay within budgets. And again, one of the things that was flagged up this morning in the media was around something we discuss regularly. It was the eye-watering costs of external residential placements for looked after children. And again, I suppose, I've been more than happy to support joint efforts of lobbying the previous governments, and what use our voice is now, I'm not quite so sure. But is there any indication that there's any kind of effort on that? I truly hope and will applaud anybody who's ready to step up and take on that challenge, because it just, to me, is, as I've said many times, it is not acceptable, given the levels of profits that people are making. It cannot be justified. We've got up to £20,000 a week to look after one child, and it's topical about the costs of private school places, but it eclipses the cost of a boarder at Eton to look after some of these children, and we have to. There's a limit to what we can do locally, but it needs a national effort, and I will gladly support anything that we can do on that.
Thank you. I mean, we are just on the part of your question, Councillor. I mean, we are speaking to government ministers around the issues we face. Current local government minister is a former leader of a northern council, so I I think we've got a good understanding of our challenges there, and as you say, you know, budgets are always a full package which is delivered on the day, not something that is chopped up into pieces and presented bit by bit on the way up. So I think we'll all be really excited to see what's announced on October the 30th. Julie, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Leader. I suppose just on the specific point about external residential placements, and as Councillor Lamb has said, the fact that it is a national issue, that it reflects a broken system in relation to the provision of placements, the quality of placements and the cost of placements. I think, as has already been perhaps touched upon, you know, it's really important, I think, to highlight the particular demographics in Leeds in terms of that increase in adolescence in the city, the fact that those adolescents, you know, are living in the most deprived areas of our city, and the evidence-based correlation and link between abuse, neglect and the need for children to become looked after. And whilst we are absolutely committed in Leeds to our family valued principles and values, so really doing our utmost as a partnership to keep children with family, there will always be occasions when, in order to safeguard children and in order to ensure that they're provided with the right help and protection, that we have to you know, bring them into state care. Obviously, you know, we've talked here previously about our sufficiency strategy, and key to that sufficiency strategy is to expand our own level of in-house residential care. You know, the majority of all of our, we've got 10, you know, children's homes are rated good or outstanding by Ofsted. You know, we've currently now got an additional 4 children's homes in Leeds small group living homes, and we have had children placed there recently, so 4 children placed there recently. All of those children have been able to return to Leeds from costly external residential provision. We have another 3 small group living homes which are currently being refurbished. 2 of those are about to be handed over to the Directorate imminently. You know, so I won't repeat, you know, all of the activity that we've discussed previously in terms of the sufficiency strategy, but, you know, there is clear action underway to increase our own provision, and we are doing all that we can to get the, you know, the pace around that, you know, and also working very closely with Ofsted in terms of ensuring that the registration of those small group living homes, you know, is as efficient and you know, timely as we possibly can achieve.
Thank you, Julie. Helen, please.
Thank you. Just to say on the actual issue of the cost of private children's homes, etc., residential homes, the Children's Minister, Janet Darby, has said that the forthcoming Children's Wellbeing Bill would strengthen the regulation of the sector, and talks about tackling profiteering from children's care placements in England. And it talks about the return of children's social care to delivering high quality outcomes for children, children looked after at sustainable cost to the taxpayer. So there is already legislation coming forward by the new government that will tackle the rising and profiteering from children's residential placements. So we'll await on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Mariana, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to, you know, state the obvious, it is a massive gap. You know, we're all really acutely aware of that. As a team, we've been working really hard to try and, you know, reduce the pressures as far as we can, but we've also got to be really realistic on that and make sure that from, you know, a professional point of view in terms of demand and a professional point of view in terms of, you know, Section 151, that those pressures are robust. And that's where we've got the pressure as it stands at the moment. We're, you know, as officers, we're working really hard to bring forward a range of proposals for members, but, you know, it is really challenging because obviously it's not the first time we've done it. And as always, we've got a really clear, extensive timetable for member engagement on those proposals as we work through, you know, our normal arrangements with scrutiny members particularly on those proposals, and we'll be bringing them forward, you know, before the initial budget proposal is produced for December.
Thank you. I'm going to bring, unless somebody else has got a comment to make, I'm going to bring item 14 to a close. I think we've started to stray on to item 15, which is the financial health monitoring, but I will see if everybody's happy with the recommendations on page 461, which I take it people are. That's great, thank you. Councillor Cooper, would you like to introduce item 15, please?
Thank you, Leader, and I will officially introduce item 15. I know we have begun to discuss it. So this is the financial health monitoring that we bring to Executive Board every meeting, so that it can be seen and published. We are really transparent about our financial situation. The comment from Councillor Lamb previously about the £106 million gap for just next year alone is absolutely right. It is eye-watering and an extremely difficult position for us to be in as a local authority. But as Councillor Lamb knows, we are not the only local authority who are looking at difficult financial challenges ahead of them. Indeed, some local authorities have already been facing extreme difficulties for quite some time. And that is because local authorities have not been funded the way that they should have been funded for the last 14 years. And we have now, year on year on year on year, have made efficiencies. We have made savings from all of our directorate areas as and where we've been able to do so. But after such a long time, it gets more difficult to be able to make those savings, because we've already squeezed everything that we potentially can out of those areas. And so that's why it's getting more difficult for us to find those savings that we need to do so. So in terms of this month's iteration of the situation, as Exec Board members will see, we are now reporting a projected overspend of 22.2 million at the end of the year. And again, the same issues are the key drivers and reasons why we're looking at that overspend. It's mainly in children's, the demand for service and the high cost that brings about for us to be able to make sure that we do indeed step up where vulnerable children are in need, and we provide that. But to try and alleviate some of those pressures and to mitigate the situation throughout the year, we've put in a good number of measures to try and bring that down, which include a freeze on recruitment unless it's essential, minimising agency and overtime spend. The report goes into detail about a number of the things that we are taking tighter controls over to help alleviate those pressures that we face in year, as well as over the next 5 years. I will leave it there unless there's any questions following that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Any questions or comments?
I think I covered it.
Yeah. Great. You've been very efficient today, Councillor Lammin. In covering two papers, at once. We'll put it in our productivity plan. If there's no more questions or comments from anybody around the table, I'll turn to the recommendations on page 572, and I take it everybody is happy with those recommendations. That's great, thank you. And if you could move on to item 16, please, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you again, Leader. This report I'm bringing to Executive Board today is an update on the core business transformation programme and gives details of the progress up to date and the expectation going forward over the next couple of years to do with the core business transformation. The paper goes into detail about that progress, showing how we're going to improve our business functions such as finance, HR, payroll and procurement. The current systems are becoming really outdated, old-fashioned, and contracts are overdue and or due to expire. So they do need to be replaced with new modern systems. It also goes into detail about the technology refresh that will bring about as well. But it's not just about a digital solution, the core business transformation. It's about our approaches to how we do undertake business within the council, and how we can do it differently, more efficiently, that will benefit the council and everybody else. So I'll leave it there for now, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Are there any questions or comments on this paper, please? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I put the caveat that I haven't been briefed directly on this, so it may be that some of the questions you want to pick up outside the meeting, but I just wonder if we could get an update on the implementation of the new payroll system from previous bitter experiences. Anytime we're implementing a new IT system for anything, I get nervous, and our effectiveness has not always been brilliant, particularly when we try and build them ourselves. So I'd just be grateful for some comment and reassurance that that's all on track, on budget, and we're satisfied it's going to deliver what we need it to.
Thank you. Mariana, please.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you an assurance that as far as possible at the moment, we're on track. We are slightly later than we planned, and the reason for that is learning from others and making sure that we're doing even more testing, user testing, to make sure the system really is robust before we implement it, rather than implement it and then end up in a pickle, as you know some authorities unfortunately have. So we've been working really hard to learn from others. At the moment it's on budget. We have used some contingency, but it is on budget. Victoria and the team are managing it really tightly, as you'd expect, and very happy to provide an additional briefing if that's helpful at a more detailed level. But also just to emphasise, this report was considered, or a similar report was considered at Corporate Governance and Audit at the end of July, given the significance and from the point of view of the governance arrangements we've got with it and how we're engaging on it, and it is on scrutiny next month as well in terms of strategy and resources. So hopefully it's getting a fair airing, given it will affect everybody because of payroll and digital sign-on for everybody on our finance system.
Yeah, Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, just to add to some of Mariana's comments as well. I mean, obviously, given the financial challenges that we face, it's important that we are ambitious in terms of the timelines in, ensuring that we'll get things done in time and, and done appropriately. But we can't really be rushed into this, because we've got to get these critical systems done right and correct. So actually we need to make sure that they are robust before we do go live with them, and we'll make sure that we do everything we possibly can to ensure that. But with the caveat of once you go live, you never know, do you? But then, but we will do everything in our gift to be able to ensure that that's done in that robust way. But we have taken some learning from other authorities that have been through similar processes as well.
Thank you. I think it's also worth saying, everybody recognises the risk around this, but also the risk of not doing anything was high as well, and it's not and that was part of the sort of some of the decision making earlier on in the programme around sort of some of the out of date systems that we were using. So if there's any more further questions or comments on this, I'll turn to recommendations on page 617, and I'm going to take it from discussion. Everybody's happy with those. That's great, thank you. And we'll move on to item 17, please, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Leader. And just before I go into my introduction around this paper, I have to say that I'm truly delighted to be bringing about this report to Executive Board today. And right at the outset, I want to thank all council members for their support through this process that we've undertaken, particularly the women representatives on Leeds City Council, who I met and spoke with, every single one of them, who were supportive of the work that we were suggesting to take forward at that time, and really delighted that work and hopeful that work would come to fruition. So I'm really pleased to bring this report to Executive Board today to show that progress has been made, and we will be in a position to be able to have those plaques on the council chamber in a sooner rather than later. But my heartfelt thanks go to all members of the council for supporting the work that we've done so far. So this report is bringing an update on the plans to recognise inspirational women. If Exec Board members recall, we did make the decision in full council previously around the work that we're undertaking to recognise inspirational women in the council and further in the city as well. It's really important that to recognise that the men that have already been recognised in the council chamber, we take nothing away from the men that have been recognised, and they should have been recognised in that way. We just want to add the inspirational work of women from those years as well to the walls, so that we can encourage girls, young girls and women and so on to look up and see that they, can lead to bigger and, inspirational things for themselves. We took this report to a public consultation earlier in the year, and I have to say it's one of the things that have been most supported by the city. We had 1,438 responses to the consultation around this, and we only had 4 negative responses from members of the public around that, which is quite remarkable for some of the consultations that we undertake here as a council, I have to say. So, and a lot of the responses were saying that we should recognise all 6 of the women. And so we did take to council that that's what we'd like to take forward, recognising all 6 of the women who we'd gone to consultation on. So the women that are being recognised are a group of women, first of all, who were known as the Barnbow Lasses, Leonora Cohen, OBE, Gertrude Paul, Alice Bacon, CBE, Beryl Burton, OBE, and Ivy Benson. These women reflect the different areas of the city and the different areas of expertise, and kind of give that variety over the ages. The report is asking for permission for us to erect 8 plaques in the Civic Hall, and that is to do the work at the same time, to save money in the future from doing it, but also it shows and demonstrates that we want to continue this work going forward, and how we might achieve that. So that work going forward to further recognition of other women will follow the consultation who wanted us to recognise other inspirational women from the past as well. So elected members will be taking that work forward, cross-party, of course, as this has always been. But yeah, my thanks to facilities, management, to planning, to listed building officers, to everybody who's been involved in this. But particular thanks go to Tom our exiting chief executive, who agreed the funding from his salary sacrifice that he doesn't take to fund this work going forward. So I'll leave it there, Chair. I've probably said far too much than I should have.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Are there any comments on this? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you. I detect Councillor Cooper is quite proud of this, and rightly so. And I was reflecting that I think probably, I suspect, like most of the men round the table, my life has been shaped much more by inspirational women than it has by inspirational men. And it's probably to our collective shame that it's taken us this long to get to this point. And the reason I wanted to say something about this is I have seen some negative comments on social media and other places as to, well, isn't this sexist, and why is, but we're just recognising women, and it struck me that probably the vast majority of our citizens have never set foot in our council chamber. They might, I know millions tune in to watch us each time, but you can't see the walls on the monitor, and we're surrounded by the names of some, quite rightly, inspirational men who've made a huge contribution to our city, but it's exclusively men. And it's quite right that we're looking to redress the balance and make sure that we pass that inspiration on to the next generations. To all of us have got nieces, daughters, granddaughters, and the message is there is nothing you can't achieve in this city. There is no ceiling that you can't break through. That's what this is really about. Acknowledging great contributions from the past, but inspiring the next generation. And I kind of like the fact that there's 2 spare plaques to say to young women in the city, there's no reason you couldn't be the next name on that wall. And let's strive to help and support them to do that. So I think the key thing for me in supporting the recommendations is, the way I would sum it up is to say this has to be job started, not job done. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mariana, please.
Yeah, I better just say, because if Tom was here, he would be wanting to say how delighted he is that we've got to this point today, and how he'd wanting to be thank Councillor Cooper, other members, Heather, and all the other colleagues that Councillor Cooper mentioned before to make it happen. He was really passionate to make sure this has happened, so it's good it's happened before he's actually exited his role. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any more comments, please? I don't see anybody. Thank you, Councillor Cooper, for bringing this forward, and thank you, Councillor Lamb, for what you said. And you're absolutely right. You know, there's a lot more walls in the Civic Hall, and the history of this city isn't complete. And we need to do so much more to make sure that people are aspirational moving forward. So I will turn to the recommendations on page 657, and I've no doubt everybody agrees with the recommendations. That's great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. And we'll move on to Councillor Prior's papers, please.
Thank you, Leader. So this is the Council's response to WICA's Mass Rapid Transit public consultation. The Council, of course, is supportive of WICA's plans to bring mass transit to West Yorkshire. This includes 2 lines initially, a Leeds line, which will be going from the White Rose Centre up to Jimmy's, and a Bradford line, which will go from Leeds City Centre to Bradford City Centre. The paper includes our specific endorsements, endorsing the Council's preference for route option L1 via Carveley Street and Infirmary Street, and also L6 via Elland Road and the Stadium, and then to the Ring Road in Beeston, and then the Leeds line corridor. We'll also be endorsing a response that further discussions are required with WICA in respect of the route options on the Bradford line in order for us to state a preference. I do just want to touch briefly on how important mass transit and a tram is to the City of Leeds. The economic impact of mass transit would be huge, and it is essential to the future growth, economic growth of our city. Leeds is a big city, you know, of over 800,000 people, but we do have quite a small city centre. So as we grow, we need to continually improve ways to get people in and out of the city centre. Last year, we saw footfall in Leeds increase by 2.6%. This is something which we need to continue as jobs grow. We know the new government's priorities around additional housing, and this is something that can really lean into that. This will open up new sites on brownfield land to create new housing for people, and we know how important that is. I will leave it there for introductory comments. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Pryor. Are there any comments, please? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. For far too long, we've been the biggest city in Europe without a mass transit system. And one thing I've been clear about in my own mind as an opposition member, both on the Combined Authority and here, is it is to nobody's benefit for us just to oppose for the sake of opposing, and we all have to get behind and speak with one voice on this. So no question of our support in this going forward. There are, in that spirit though of trying to get it right and making sure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, some hopefully constructive comments. So first of all, it is a lot of people in West Yorkshire will look at the plans and proposals and the route options and the cost and say, right, what's that? How does that help me? If you're in Wakefield or Kirklees or Calderdale or Wetherby, even with a master plan, it's not conceivable that routes are going to stretch to those places within 20, 30, 40 years. And so there's a big job of work to do to sell the wider benefits of starting mass transit. You have to start somewhere. And that's been the mistake in the past, that we just haven't started. There are still remarkably, the finance officers will prick up, in my ward, there are Section 106 pots with unspent contributions towards Supertram that are still sat there waiting. But we have to sell to people that there are much wider benefits. Yes, the line might not come to all of our areas, but the jobs it brings in construction, in engineering, in all manner of other sectors may well come to those communities and may well be benefited. And I think it's remiss that, for example, Wyker have chosen not to have any consultation events in outer North East Leeds because the line's not coming there. And you think, I'm sorry, that's not the right approach. The taxes of those people are going to help to pay for this, and there should be benefits and they need to be sold. And I'd like to suggest that's something that's in our response, that they should be reaching out to all communities, whether they will directly see this route or not. It has to be seen as something that benefits our whole city and the whole of West Yorkshire, which I believe it will. But it's got to be made crystal clear why and how those benefits will come. The other concern I have is actually about the capacity of the Combined Authority, and I make these points there as well. It's a relatively new organisation. It's growing its reach rapidly. It is trying to do a lot, and trying to do this and bus franchising and various other things it's doing at scale, at pace. I have a concern about overreach. The decisions are made, so I'm just putting it out there. I don't think it's going to change anything, but we have to, as the biggest partner, really make sure they're supported and enabled to deliver those things at scale on time, and that we do what we can. I know Councillor Lewis will in his roles, but it is a concern to me that when you're trying to do a lot of things in one go, in many ways, do one thing and do it well, rather than do lots of things and mess some of them up. So it is a concern. And while we're on this, I'd be grateful if we could have an update on where we are with the White Rose station, the rail halt at the airport, because again, it's really important that we get that infrastructure connected, and Thorpe Park as well. So there's a lot to go on, but this is really important that we get it right.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb, and I'm sure if we can't provide an update on the 3 rail stations in this meeting, because obviously it's not part of the paper, we can certainly very quickly get one over to you. I'll make a couple of comments. I can see Councillor Pryor wants to come in. You missed Kippax off the list of the places on there, which I'm sure you were. I'm sure you were thinking about.
I want to leave you the space.
I'm sure you were thinking about us in Kippax. I do think there is a point around this. Is as well as launching the route consultation on mass transit, which is a paper in front of us, and this is a paper discussing. It's not a general update on every public transport issue at the moment. There was also the local transport plan consultation as well, which is much more encompassing. You're absolutely right. We do need to consider everybody. It is a part of it as well. You touched on bus franchising as well, and it is about having that comprehensive update. We are decades behind in infrastructure in West Yorkshire. I think everybody accepts that, both in terms of the physical infrastructure, but also some of the way that services run. London had an Oyster ticket 20 odd years ago and things like that. So there's a lot of catching up to do, and I think we need to be very clear about the pace on that. And you're right about making sure we get every step right. For those of us who are passengers on Arriva, buses to learn at one of their depots is now unusable. Again, it's just about perhaps some of the failing systems and the failing infrastructure we have in the county, which we need to move on about. The second thing I would say is, I am going to praise Manchester. I know a controversial point, but you look at the development of their mass transit. They started developing a scheme back in the 80s. It is expanding all the time. I don't think we should see the proposal in front of us again is what we're talking about. We shouldn't see it as there is an end point. An end point to this, and certainly having that economic growth and vision is really important. So those are just a couple of points I wanted to make. And again, I think I know Councillor Pryor wants to come in, and I think Martin wants to come in as well.
Probably to make some very similar points. You're absolutely right about your points about Wetherby, and of course the leader is even more correct about his comments about Kippax. I mean, when I've travelled to Wetherby in my previous portfolio, I've had to leave West Yorkshire to get into Wetherby, and that is a real problem. It's something which I hope in the future potentially this could address, but equally the bus franchising I think is really exciting as well, and could address. When we talk about wider benefits, I think there's a real strength in these plans that it's a West Yorkshire mass transit system and not just Leeds. We know that a huge amount of people work in Leeds who don't live here. I've forgotten the exact statistic, and perhaps Martin can help me, but I think it's something like 75% of, around 3/4 of arrivals at Leeds station are from outside of the area coming in. So adding more opportunities and more ease of access to the city centre is essential. And the leader's right, these two initial lines are essentially going to be a skeleton for what will hopefully be something that's developed over coming years and decades, and in the medium term. It is the start of the work, not just the end.
Martin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just in the context of the capacity challenge of the combined authority that you set out, Councillor Lamb, just to confirm to members that the City Council, through our highways and transportation team, which have a lot of experience in terms of capital programme delivery and understand the highways and transportation network of the city extremely well, are providing their full support to Wicker in terms of delivering the project. So we're trying to fulfil and enable that role.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, no, thank you for all those responses. Helpful. If I could just emphasise one point, that because I think we're on the same page, that this is the start of it. It's not the end. I just think there's a trick missed that we're not setting out that big a vision, and it is a West Yorkshire scheme, but there are large parts of West Yorkshire at the moment who will say, well, Kirklees, Calderdale, Wakefield, even excluding Wetherby and Kippax, which we should never do in any conversation, but they will. How is this for us? And I think just being able to see on a future map, it's never going to end up exactly as it is, but just to state clearly the intention, this is the start, and this is for everyone, this is for all of West Yorkshire, and really getting that point across so people understand this is for all of us. It's not just something that's connecting Leeds and Bradford and the other bits.
Councillor Pryor, please.
Just to reassure you, I have met with some of my opposite numbers in the other West Yorkshire authorities, including ones to where the tram doesn't initially go to yet. And I think everybody does understand that this is the first step with more to come. I probably, I mean, it's obviously Wyker have chosen to publish two rather than doing a much wider map. I do think that's the right approach to take rather than kind of over-promising a huge plan. As a city, we've been here before, over many decades before I was even born. So I do think it's right to take an initially cautious approach before we start kind of saying where we're going to go next. But I do think that this holds such exciting prospects for the future.
Thank you. Any more comments on this paper? Okay, I take it we are happy with the recommendations that are in front of us, and obviously noting some of the wider comments made in the discussion. We'll certainly get that briefing on the railway stations as well, Councillor Lamb. That's great. Is everybody happy with those? Thank you. So we'll move on to Councillor Rafique's paper, item 19, please.
Thank you, Leader. This is the progress report on the governance and delivery of Leeds food strategy, which we approved back in March 2023. It includes amendments to the objectives, progress against the actions contained in the strategy, and key performance indicators. The three core missions in the strategy mirror the Best City Ambition strategic pillars, which is health and well-being, mirrors the Best City Ambition's own health and well-being pillar. Food security and economy corresponds to our inclusive growth pillar, and sustainability and resilience aligns with our net zero pillar. The report also highlights several areas the Council working together on this, namely public health, employment skills, environmental services, plumbing, parks and green spaces, and financial inclusion have all contributed to the strategy. Foodwise Leeds and Leeds Food Aid Network are also essential to the strategy and progress made. So it's not only a good example of cross-council working, but a partnership between council and the third sector. Some of the actions we are working on in the report include promoting and breaking down barriers to healthy eating, developing programs that improve access to healthy food for those on low incomes, and helping local residents and businesses market locally produced food, and expanding local food sector and reducing waste. I'll stop there, Chair, and happy to take any comments and questions.
Thank you, Councillor Rafique. Are there any questions on this, please? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I make these comments partly in the context of the financial challenge, where we're going to have to look at various things that we do and how we do them. And this is one of those, for me, where there's lots of laudable aims in it. But I wonder if this is just a strategy for the sake of having a strategy. When I was Scrutiny Board Chair, I'm not making this up, we had an officer that came to talk to us and told us there was serious work going on in the council to work on a strategy for all of the strategies, because we've got so many of them. In this one, I just wonder if we can deliver the aims a different way. It says in the report, whether I've misread it, misunderstood it, or the language is not great, it says there's a considerable resource implications from the delivery of this strategy. It then doesn't go on to set out what those resource implications are. So it would be useful to know how much all of this is costing. And I'd also have a challenge about some of the measurements and how we're, well, laudable aims. One is around increasing the uptake of people having 5 fruit and veg a day, which of course we want to do that. How on earth are we going to measure that and capture it? I mean, I can contribute that I had a banana at lunchtime if that helps with the calculations, but I just don't see how we're that was my lunch. I'll have cake later to make up for it, but yeah, I just wonder if we're going to have to seriously, given the challenge, say, do we need to be doing it this way? Doesn't mean the aims and objectives aren't laudable, but I can't see in the paper what those considerable resource implications are, and I'd take a bit of persuading that there isn't a potential saving while still being able to deliver the outcomes.
Thank you. Polly, please.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that I've just read that paragraph and I can see it's not
the best worded, I think, if I'm being honest. In terms of the resource of what we're doing, a lot of it is within core jobs. What we're trying to do with the food strategy is to actually bring it across so that we're not working in silos. So, for example, if I take the carbon, we're looking at how we kind of nudge behaviour on what people eat within our cafes. That links back to some of our zoo licensing obligations. But what we're doing is then linking that back to public health and making sure we're not doing things that link to carbon that go against our public health agenda. So I think public health already, and Victoria's here, I'm sure, would say they already have agendas on things like obesity and other things within food health, as do financial inclusion. But what was happening previously was those conversations weren't happening, we weren't joining up, we weren't trying to find the joint opportunities. So I think the resource paragraph is misleading, you're absolutely right, because I don't think there is sort of an additional cost, it's what we're doing. I think what was intended by that was more you know, that there's always pressures within the system, probably on those core objectives that exist anyway.
Thank you, Polly. Does anybody else want to come in on this paper, please? Victoria, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Lamb. Just on the specific question of the measurements around 5 a day, we do now receive routine data on proportion of adults who report to eating 5 a day and more, and also how that breaks down across the city. So it's relatively new, but we don't have to set up our own system to do that. It is data we routinely now get. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on this paper? Councillor Rafiq, please.
I'd just like to say that I think, like Polly said, it's about, you know, working together, but also it's about promoting, you know, with our residents about healthy, the benefits of healthy eating, and where possible producing more healthy food within Leeds and reducing waste as well at the same time.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to the recommendations on the paper, and I take it everybody is happy with those recommendations. And okay, I take those as agreed. That's great, thank you. And that comes to the end of the meeting, and it is the absolute end of the meeting because we don't have any below the line items to discuss. So I thank everybody for coming along.